All right, let's jump right into this. Today we're unpacking a fascinating explainer based on Merlin Stone's massive research project, specifically her landmark work, When God Was a Woman. We're going to look at exactly how things like sexual coercion, the subjugation of women, and the ownership of female sexuality actually became ingrained in our society.
So, to understand how purity culture and male entitlement became the norm, we've got to unravel a mystery that is literally thousands of years old. How did women go from being revered as the creators of all life to being painted as the ultimate sinners who caused the downfall of humanity in Eden? The source argues this wasn't some natural human evolution. It was a calculated political shift.
Section 1. When God was female.
To get the full picture, we have to travel back to a drastically different era, a time when the supreme deity across the Near and Middle East was actually a woman. As you can see, this timeline brilliantly illustrates just how massive the era of goddess worship really was before the relatively recent introduction of male-dominated religions. We're talking about archaeological evidence stretching from 25,000 BC with Paleolithic Venus figures all the way to 500 AD when the last goddess temples were closed. For thousands of years, the ultimate creator was viewed as a divine ancestors. Now, Stone argues that these ancient societies were matrilineal. What does that mean for us? It means family names, property, and territorial rights were passed exclusively through the mother. Since maternity is an undeniable biological fact, you always know who the mother is. This system gave women massive economic and social power. Women were literally the heads of households and the primary landowners.
Take a look at the term Kadishtu. In ancient languages, it translates literally to holy or sacred women. These were women who practiced complete sexual autonomy within the goddess temples. But what's really wild is that later male scholars repeatedly mistranslated this term as ritual prostitutes. It's a complete projection of a modern, puritanical bias onto ancient female sexual freedom.
And because paternity wasn't required for property inheritance in this matrilineal setup, women's sexuality just wasn't policed. They maintained complete independence. In places like ancient Egypt and Sumer, records show women owning homes, wielding serious wealth, and even engaging in independent civil litigations against their own husbands.
Section 2. The Patriarchal Invasions.
So, the crucial point here is understanding the inciting incident that violently destroyed this ancient status quo and essentially birthed the subjugation of women. Starting around 2400 BC, northern nomadic tribes, often called Indo-Europeans, began sweeping into the Near and Middle East, and they brought with them a completely opposing worldview. They worshipped male storm gods on mountains, demanded hereditary male kingships, and most importantly, practiced a strict patrilineal system, meaning property passed from father to son.
Now, here's the catch. To pass property from father to son, the invaders had to possess absolute certainty of paternity. Think about it. If a woman is sexually independent, a man can never be 100% sure a child is his. So to establish their patrilineal society, the invaders had to forcefully dismantle female sexual autonomy. Step by step, the ownership of women's sexuality became a hardcore political and economic necessity.
Section 3. Codifying female subjugation.
To enforce this brand new patrilineal system, a brutal sequence of legal codes was established to strip women of their rights and, practically speaking, turn them into property. The invaders realized that female sexual freedom was the ultimate threat to male kinship. According to the source material, this is the exact origin point of strict purity culture. Women had to be strictly controlled, confined, and monitored just to ensure the bloodline of the male heir was undisputed.
When you look at the ancient Levite and Assyrian laws analyzed in the text, you see the horrific codification of sexual coercion. Rape literally became codified as a property transaction and a forced marriage. Just look at this verse. If a man violated a virgin, he simply paid her father a fee, and boom, she became his wife. The woman's agency was completely erased. She was viewed merely as damaged goods being transferred from one male owner to another.
And it gets worse. These shocking historical excerpts show the sheer violence used to enforce female virginity and punish any remnants of that ancient sexual autonomy. Death by stoning or burning was prescribed for women who stepped outside the strict boundaries of male ownership. It was essentially a reign of terror designed to break the independence of women.
So a massive double standard was born out of all this. These politically motivated laws demanded premarital virginity and strict marital fidelity for women under threat of death, while men were permitted multiple wives and concubines. On top of that, divorce laws were designed so a husband could just dismiss his wife, leaving her entirely destitute. This system systematically forced women into submissive obedience simply to survive economically.
Section 4. Weaponizing the Eden myth.
But as the source points out, brutal laws weren't enough. To truly cement this new hierarchy and make it unquestionable, the patriarchal priesthoods had to rewrite the very origins of humanity. This comparison here brilliantly highlights how the Genesis story was a calculated piece of political propaganda. The authors took every sacred symbol of the ancient goddess religion and inverted them to be demonic. The serpent, once a symbol of prophetic wisdom for priestesses, became the evil deceiver. The sacred tree became the forbidden fruit. And most shockingly, instead of a female giving birth to humanity, the myth claims woman was created merely as an afterthought from a man's rib.
The explainer outlines the very specific political goals of this rewrite. By having Eve eat the fruit of sexual consciousness first and tempt Adam, the myth squarely blamed woman for the downfall of humanity. It painted human sexuality as the original sin and defined a woman's ultimate purpose as serving man. By wrapping all of this in divine scripture, they ensured women would internalize their own subjugation as a decree from God rather than a political defeat by an invading army.
The text points out a really crucial maneuver right here in this quote. The natural, biological pain of childbirth was suddenly framed as an eternal punishment for Eve's disobedience. And notice that last line, "He shall rule over you." That established a literal, divine mandate for male entitlement and dominance.
Stone traces how this single narrative became the foundational excuse for millennia of female oppression. For centuries, religious and political leaders heavily referenced the sin of Eve to demand female silence, deny them education, and completely strip them of legal rights, insisting that women were inherently gullible and dangerous.
Simone de Beauvoir hit the nail on the head with this quote featured in the source text. Wrapping this violent political shift in divine scripture made it nearly impossible for women to rebel. Think about it. If a society believes that God himself ordained female subjugation, fighting against it isn't just a political struggle anymore. It becomes a literal sin against the divine.
The real tragedy, as the author points out, is that centuries of this propaganda have caused society to view these constructed political double standards as natural human instincts. The lingering echoes are everywhere today. You see it in the continued cultural obsession with female purity, the double standards surrounding sexual behavior, and those deeply ingrained assumptions of male authority and entitlement.
Section 5. The provocative clause.
So, we have to ask ourselves, how much of what we deem natural gender roles today is actually just the lingering echo of an ancient political strategy designed to steal women's economic and physical autonomy? If our cultural foundation regarding purity, female submission, and male entitlement was built on a violent political rewrite, the text challenges us to ask, is it time we rewrite it back? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to think on that.